Richard Milhouse Nixon, having announced, as the whole world knows now, last night, that he was resigning, will leave the White House in a very short time now after a farewell meeting with his cabinet and the White House staff. They have gathered now in the East Room at the White House, and there the President will speak to them briefly. Then there will be a handshake farewell, we understand, a sort of a reception line in reverse, a farewell line, and then the President will move on out to the south lawn of the White House with his family, Mrs. Nixon and his daughters, Julie and Tricia, and their husbands, to board a helicopter to fly to Andrews Air Force Base. There, an Air Force plane will take him on out to San Clemente, California, and retirement as the President. Dan Rather is outside the White House now and will be following these dramatic last moments of the Nixon administration along with us this morning. Good morning, Dan.
We took a look back to the Executive Office building and could see any number of White House staff members, shoes shined, pants pressed, and most of them, I should say some of them, with their families with them, heading for the East Room, and these last few minutes with President Nixon. What this is about this morning in the East Room, which is probably the most famous room in the White House itself, with the possible exception of the Lincoln Room upstairs and the President's own Oval Office, the East Room where Abigail Adams used to hang her wash, where so many historic occasions have taken place in the history of this country. The White House staff members, the so-called little people of the White House staff, as well as those whose names have been in the headlines regularly, are to say goodbye to President Nixon. Just after that, the President will be saying goodbye to members of his cabinet, and then the President will be taking off from the White House South Lawn, over the Washington Monument, past the Lincoln Memorial, on his way to Andrews Air Force Base in suburban Maryland.
And here
in the
is
East Room of the White House, pardon me, Walter, the President and Mrs. Nixon, I believe, are entering the room, yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America and Mrs. Nixon, Mr. and Mrs. David Eisenhower, Mr. and Mrs. Edward Cox.
This is a scene, Walter, that Richard Nixon, by my own fast count this morning, has done at least 150 times during the 2,000-plus days of his presidency. This will be the last time that he will do it as President of the United States.
Dan, there's a tear in the President's eye.
Yes, for the first time during this week, Walter, there is.
We did hear Dan last night at the White House when he met with the leadership of the Congress. After a rather emotional talk to them, he broke down and cried, and the senators all then cried, we were told.
Thank you. Well, members of the Cabinet, members of the White House staff, all of our friends here, I think the record should show that this is one of those spontaneous things that we always arrange whenever the President comes in to speak. And it will be so reported in the press, and we don't mind, because they've got to call it as they see it. But on our part, believe me, it is spontaneous. You are here to say goodbye to us, and we don't have a good word for it in English. The best is au revoir. We'll see you again. You are getting something in government, and I want you to tell this to your children, and I hope the nation's children will hear it too. something in government service that is far more important than money. It's a cause bigger than yourself. It's the cause of making this the greatest nation in the world, the leader of the world, because without our leadership, the world will know nothing but war, possibly starvation, or worse in the years ahead. With our leadership, it will know peace, it will know plenty. We have been generous, and we will be more generous in the future as we are able to. But most important, we must be strong here, strong in our hearts, strong in our souls, strong in our belief, and strong in our willingness to sacrifice, as you have been willing to sacrifice in a pecuniary way to serve in government. We think sometimes when things happen that don't go the right way, we think that when you don't pass the bar exam the first time, I happened to, but I was just lucky. I mean, my writing was so poor, the bar examiner said, we just got to let the guy through. We think that when someone dear to us dies, we think that when we lose an election, we think that when we suffer a defeat, that all is ended. We think, as T.R. said, that the light had left his life forever. Not true. It's only a beginning, always. The young must know it. The old must know it. It must always sustain us, because the greatness comes not when things go always good for you, but the greatness comes, and you're really tested, when you take some knocks, some disappointments, when sadness comes. Because only if you've been in the deepest valley can you ever know how magnificent it is to be on the highest mountain. And so I say to you on this occasion, we leave proud of the people who have stood by us and worked for us and served this country. We want you to be proud of what you've done. We want you to continue to serve in government if that is your wish. Always give your best. Never get discouraged. Never be petty. Always remember, others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them. And then you destroy yourself. And so we leave with high hopes, in good spirit, and with deep humility, and with very much gratefulness in our hearts. I can only say to each and every one of you, we come from many faiths. We pray perhaps to different gods, but really the same God in a sense. But I want to say for each and every one of you, not only will we always remember you, not only will we always be grateful to you, but always you will be in our hearts, and you will be in our prayers. Thank you very much.
President Nixon in the White House East Room saying his goodbyes to members of the cabinet and ranking members of his staff. The schedule now calls for the president to go to the south lawn of the White House in a few moments to leave the White House for the last time as president.